立法會主席。
各位早晨，全體委員會繼續審議2013年撥款條例草案，現在係繼續第二項嘅合併辯論。黃國興議員，
主席，我呢個案制呢係上個禮拜。
Mr. Chairman, I pressed the button on Friday last week, but I would be brief for a minute or two. This is already the fourth day of the filibustering, and we have been wasting millions of dollars unwillingly. Last week, in relation to the FTU, in relation to our honorary chairman, there was unjustified allegations. We have to air the strongest criticism, and we find it regrettable. The FTU has been working for the citizens of Hong Kong, and in particular the labor force, for 60 years. We have got over 400,000 members. It shows that we're really working for the well-being of the grassroots and the labor sector. We don't want to have filibustering, so we will keep a low profile. We won't argue with them. So that ends my speech, but we will continue to support the bill, and I hope you will soon cut off the filibustering. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, Mr. Chairman. Please have a head count under Rule 17.3. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just now, Mr. Wong Kwok-hing was saying that members who took part in the filibustering have been untrue and have been making allegations. Since he has made a point about it, so I think I'm really entitled to talk about why I would like to cut the honorarium in relation to Mr. Cheng Yu-tong. Otherwise, it would not be right. Mr. Chairman, you're right. In this chamber, every member can make use of his own time slot to share his viewpoint. My viewpoint is clear. Mr. Cheng Yu-tong, as an experienced EXCO member, he should receive a pay cut. I don't know why Mr. Wong is saying that I'm making unjustified allegations. The FTU in the year 1994, when Mr. Tam Yu-chung was still both the FTU senior member as well as a member of the DAB, he was in both capacities, and later on he also joined the Executive Council. And Six-chung, the then CE, break the rule, and he set up the Elderly Services Commission, and Mr. Tam was appointed to head the Elderly Services Commission. Mr. Cheng Yu-tong, was he appointed as a member of the National People's Congress or the CPPCC? I don't know. But I think he should have been appointed in his personal capacity, because the Basic Law has said that the central government doesn't interfere with the local affairs of Hong Kong. In other words, even if he has been appointed, he would not and he should not speak as an NPC deputy or CPPCC member. So he has only one capacity, that is the honorary chairman of the FTU. I want to talk about universal retirement protection. Well, I was referring to the minutes of the proceedings of the predecessor of this council. And in fact, everything has been minuted. Mr. Tam Yiu-chung, under the colonial rules, in the colonial days, when we were still subject to the British Hong Kong government rule, very rightly, on behalf of the FTU, Mr. Tam Yiu-chung pointed out that for a sunset colonial administration, not to make preparations for the future aging of the population, then it would be wrong. Mr. Tam Yiu-chung at that time went into details and he cited a lot of data, and the standard is very different from today's FTU members. Point of order, he has been repeating and repeating himself. He has been referring to Mr. Tam Yiu-chung many times. He's not a member of the EXCO, and he's not related to anything being discussed today. If you want to raise a point about point of order, please refer to the relevant rule of the rules of procedure. You don't have to elaborate on it. 41.1. Yes, I know, Ms. Zhang. Please sit down. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, this is the 6th time that you speak. I permitted you to speak for a period of time and repeated what you have been saying. That's because Mr. Kwok-hing rose and then he referred to what you spoke before. He responded to what you said before. So I allowed you to respond to what Mr. Wong has been saying. But please do not go into very detailed repetition. For what you have already said and what others have already said many times, please do not repeat. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your ruling. Well, please check the record. I'm citing an example which hasn't been cited before. Mr. Leung, according to the rules of procedure, it doesn't mean that you can cite many different examples. The rules of procedure do not allow you to repeat your point of view in your argument. So if you have already put forward your argument and if you have already cited many examples, you don't need to and you should not cite more examples to illustrate the same point. Mr. Chairman, I understand. Thank you. But Mr. Wong started off by alleging me for making incorrect statements. You said that had I raised a point of order, I could only elucidate when I spoke. Yes, I've already said that I allowed you to speak in response to what Mr. Wong has said. But please do not repetitively go over the arguments that you have already put forward in the past. Please continue. Mr. Cheng Yu-tong, of course, is different from Mr. Tam Yiu-chung. They are two different individuals. What I was saying was that Mr. Cheng Yu-tong was a member, was a very important leader of the FTU. So if we want to cut his pay, then I have to examine whether he has done what he has promised to do. Mr. Chairman, I really have to remind you, as of today, the FTU, that is to which Mr. Kwok-hing belongs, I think the official positioning is that they are fighting for universal retirement protection. They are still fighting to implement the three-tier system they first proposed 19 years ago. Maybe you haven't heard of it. That is a pension for the elderly people and also a provident fund with contributions from the entire population. Now, for union, now, they joined in 1991. Now it is year 2013, so 22 years have elapsed. It was only in 1994 that they discovered it. They claimed they had been fighting for it for decades, but in fact it was only in 1994 they started to do it. Mr. Chang Yuk-tong, within his term, did engage in a number of sensational incidents. First of all, the Act Now incident. He came out to support the government. In relation to his pledge as a member of the FTU, I think this is the same because they have said that they would like to support the administration, but they haven't really reached their goal. Today, Mr. Wong Yuk-man, Chen Ji-chun, and Albert Chen have to attend a court hearing. They have said that Mr. Chang Yuk-tong was not up to his mark in the Executive Council. We are justified. We aren't saying that he shouldn't receive any pay at all. We are only saying that 1 month of his pay should be taken away. In other words, 1/12. In other words, we do appreciate that he does have some contribution. What it means is that if today or before he hasn't worked for the goals of the FTU and he hasn't been responsible for that, he hasn't taken responsibility for that, then it is not right. When the SARG in the year 1998, when Stage-Appropriation, I think, Chairman, you were at that time still a member of the LegCo. At the time, Mr. Stage-Appropriation said that there wasn't a need for a poverty line. The FTU didn't say a word. And therefore, when the government cut the CSS rates when there was a budget deficit by 11.1%, the major victims weren't as pointed out by the administration at that time, namely the lazy bones. In fact, according to the data, for those who are unemployed and on CSSA, they only accounted for less than 15%. In fact, half of them are the poor elderly who are most helpless. In other words, this is a very serious case of dereliction of duty. And as of today, this cut of 11.1% of the CSS rates hasn't been made good of. And thirdly, when I first engaged in the filibustering, so-called, but in fact we were discharging our inherent duty to monitor the government. And there was in relation to the old age living allowance. In fact, when compared with the $2,300 first proposed by the FTU, which is equivalent to $1,430 today, of the same nature. Now the boat has come. Now the currents are fast. Why don't you just speed up and then jump onto the boat and go ahead? I have very mixed feelings here. Today I speak not for myself, but for all the legislators here, all the lawmakers before the administration can have the appropriation bill endorsed, can still have breakfast with the administration or sit down to have tea with the administration and try to find ways to resolve the crisis before us. And what is the crisis before us? Now, in this council, there are members asking questions all the time, resulting in a so-called filibustering. Time and again, the administration is saying that it is something serious. Had the FTU members or other members timely reflected this view to the administration, that is, if Mr. Chang Yuk-tong at tomorrow's meeting make it the first point to talk to C.Y. Leung that, hey, FTU has been fighting for it for 19 years. We weren't able to get it under British Hong Kong administration. Now there has been a change of guard. I think it's easier for Chang Yuk-tong to see C.Y. Leung. It's difficult for me to see C.Y. Leung, but then for Chang Yuk-tong, he's on a par with C.Y. Leung. They can have meetings at the same table. Therefore, on this issue, I think he should rightly get a month's pay cut. I am not making any false allegations against him. I have no qualms. Mr. Chairman, you have been you were a school principal. If the discipline teacher spoke in abusive language, then that shouldn't be permitted. That shouldn't be allowed. Today, our headmaster is C.Y. Leung. Mr. Zhang Yutong is similar to a senior teacher in a school. According to the basic law, C.Y. Leung should, in accordance with the relevant provisions in the basic law, appoint members of the EXCO to assist in the governance of Hong Kong.
Chairman, pardon my ignorance. I don't have any insider's information. I really don't know. Chairman, sorry. I need to stand up and speak. You can see from the beginning he has spoken for 10 minutes already, and Mr. Leung has kept on mentioning the relationship between Mr. Chang Yu-tong and FTU. And if, Chairman, you accept his point, he is going to go on to talk about Mr. Chang Yu-tong and his relationship with his parents, his children, and his colleagues, and each and every member of FTU. So he can go on for 100 days if he talks about Mr. Chang Yu-tong's affairs. Before you made a ruling, Chairman, I need to... Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, I haven't asked you to speak, so please be silent. If I think the member's speech is in contrary to the rules of procedure, I will stop him. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please continue. I'm not going to talk about Mr. Chang Yu-tong's family life because, very simply, Mr. Chang Yu-tong only wears one hat, logically speaking. He is a leader of FTU, and because he hasn't entered the EXCO as an MPC delegate, so he must be entering EXCO as a member of FTU. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, this is the 6th time you speak on this subject, so please refrain from repeating your viewpoints. Please try to be as concise as possible. I think you have repeated your points many times, so please do not repeat or I will have to direct you to discontinue. Chairman, where was I? Somebody interjected just now. So can you please tell me? I think it doesn't really matter what you were at because you were just repeating the same viewpoints over and over. I have read through the rules. It's all right for me to talk about policies, and it's all right for me to repeat my viewpoints. But I won't argue with you anyway, because I have a very important duty today. So, Chairman, my point is that FTU, as of now, in particular Mr. Chang Yu-tong, hasn't been able to explain the doubt, and that is whether he has been striving for its implementation in the Executive Council. Has he done that? Well, if I cannot repeat facts, then they will be at an advantageous position because they can make all the accusations. I was accused of not basing my speech on facts, but I need to clarify this point. Now I am approaching towards the end of the point I have to make. So very simply, Mr. Chang Yu-tong cannot remind the chief executive or the department secretaries in accordance with the functions delegated to him as under the basic law. And he could have done that. Mr. Leung, you are explaining at length the same viewpoint. If you have no new points to raise, I need to ask you to stop. I was talking about the chief executive earlier on, but I was just talking about the department secretaries because they were just sitting next to him. No, I'm talking about your viewpoint being the same, and if you have no other views to make, please be seated. Whether Chang Yu-tong has fulfilled his role in doing that, it's the same as my suggestion that Mr. Matthew Cheung, Secretary for Labour and Welfare's pay should be cut. And there is an outstanding issue in the community. That is, if the member being appointed cannot give advice to the person making the appointment, and if the difference or the gap cannot be narrowed, to me, he hasn't really fulfilled his duty. So that is why, from any perspective, Mr. Chang Yu-tong's pay should be cut. And I hope that his camp could stand up and say something. Otherwise, he could just prove one thing, and that is what I am saying is true. And please stop. Please do not stop my speech from using by using the rules of procedure. So I despise Tam Yu-chong. I despise those who dare not debate with me. Anne Chang, I despise her in particular. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please be seated. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, you've just spoken for the 6th time, and I have reminded you a number of times that you should not be speaking irrelevant to the subject, and you should not repeat yourself. Mr. Leung, please clip the microphone first. I'm sorry, the recording section. I despise the 3 members. Well, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, you are being irrelevant. Now, I'm going to talk about the 2nd member who should receive a pay cut, and that is Mr. Barry Jiang, who's a staunch supporter of the chief executive. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please be seated. May I explain once again to members this debate and how I handle the debate at the committee stage. As I mentioned a number of times before, the rules of procedures do allow members at the stage to speak more than once, but I don't think this rule can allow members to deliver his speech in chunks of 15 minutes for many times. Otherwise, the purpose of limiting a member's speech to 15 minutes would be gone. Otherwise, a member would stand up and speak for 15 minutes, sit down, and then stand up and speak for another 15 minutes. So the rule will not have any meaning. So members should organize your speech and express your viewpoints within 15 minutes. If there are other members who wish to speak, and after that, if you would like to reply to their points, it's reasonable. But I'd like members to note that if you simply want to prolong a speech of the same viewpoints by delivering your speech in chunks of 15 minutes, So I will not allow you to do so. So, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, may I remind you that this is the 7th time you're speaking on this subject, and you should not repeat your viewpoints, and you should not take it that you can go on to speak for 15 minutes and another 15 minutes. Thank you for your enlightenment. So I have not repeated these few words. I should cite them. And that is a poem. A poem I just cited, and it's a poem of Kwok-wai, and I cite this poem for my members' benefit. I won't. I understand your point. All I want to say is that some people just sit on their hands and do nothing. Some people just do half of the job, and I really hate those people. I am coming to talk about Mr. Barry Chung. Chairman, please, if you find that I am repeating myself, please make the ruling. Mr. Barry Chung broke the 6-6 rule recently. His term of office at the URA has expired, and yet he was once again appointed as chairman. Well, we all understand that for official members of the EXCO, they do receive remuneration for its work. Now, for those listening to me, please, Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please refrain from irrelevant points. Please focus on this subject. Which amendment are you referring to? Please speak to the subject. Understood. If you speak about somebody else, which is irrelevant to this CSA, I will have to direct you to stop. I am talking about 35. Chairman, may I continue? Please continue. I've told you. I've reminded you. Please note that. Understood. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm talking about the URA's chairman, Mr. Barry Chung. What I want to say is that he is wearing too many hats. So he can't juggle everything. That is, he can't hold so many posts, and that's why I'm saying that he cannot fulfill his role in the Executive Council. The reason is that he was appointed by the Chief Executive, and as chairman of the URA, of course, that was the reason why he got appointed. Chairman, in the C.Y. Leung's election manifesto and his policies after he was elected, he very much wanted to resolve deep-seated social problems. He kept on talking about high land price and the difficulty in purchasing homes and the difficulty in identifying sites for housing development and the escalating housing or property bubble. And on various occasions, every month or so, we would hear either the chief executive or the top echelon of the government, for example, Mr. John Tsang, who's not here today, reminding people of Hong Kong that the property price bubble is forming. C.Y. Leung highlighted the problem. He said that land in the urban area should be identified for public or private housing.
This was clear for all to see. Up to this moment, as far as I can see, you are not talking about resuming land for it to be used only a few years later. Pardon me for my foolishness. I remember there are 2 blocks of public housing near Lai-wan station. Mr. Kwok-hung, please do not detail government policies. I have already said that. If you want to concentrate on a particular EXCO member, please do not digress. No, Chairman, I have already said so. You should not give protracted comments on government policies. I am monitoring the CE. Now you are now debating on the proposed amendment 35. Mr. Chairman, please save your anger. Mr. Kwok-hung, if you do not come back to the issue, I will have to stop you and you will not be able to speak again. Mr. Chairman, give me 15 seconds to explain my position. Mr. Barry Cheung has been appointed by C.Y. Leung to the EXCO to help implement his manifesto. If Barry Cheung has too many positions, he cannot help the CE to do this. Your point is clear. You do not have to illustrate it. But there may be a different extent of salary reduction for Barry Cheung. It may not be for just 1 month. So the order we have assigned to these members means something. Mr. Kwok-hung, I have issued a final warning. If you still want to involve in protracted commenting, I will stop you from speaking. Mr. Chairman, why are you saying that I am being protracted in my speech? Please explain yourself. I was only talking about the Lai-wan site. Did I mention the Lai-wan site? Mr. Kwok-hung, please sit down. You stop talking now. You sit down. I will raise my hand again. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Chairman, I want to speak again. Mr. Kwok-hung, I will allow you to speak again, but then the warning I issued to you just now still holds. You are speaking for the 8th time. You cannot repeat yourself. You cannot digress. Thank you, Chairman. Please save your anger. You are working very hard. Please do not say those words again. Those are digressions. Please come back to the issue under discussion. Chairman, please, can I ask for a head count under 17(3)? I'm also working very hard myself.
梁國雄議員。
Mr. Lan Kwok-hung. Thank you, Chairman. Let us not talk about the multi-positions Mr. Barry Chung holds. Let us just assume that he has only this task at the URA, and that makes the situation even more outrageous. If that is the only position he holds, then why is it that he cannot see a lot of things that are happening? The responsibilities of the URA, Mr. Chairman, are to, having been authorized by the relevant ordinance and having received funding from the administration, to improve the urban environment. With the assistance of Mr. Barry Chung, the SARG, meaning C.Y. Leung's position, is such that the policies have been going to and fro. What is it? Did someone say anything? No? I'd just like to take a look at the arguments Mr. Zhang has had with C.Y. Leung in open fora. Let us not talk about the vacant flat tax for first-hand property. Let us not talk about whether it is effective. When the CE said that there should be a policy of Hong Kong property for Hong Kong people, Mr. Barry Chung, as chairman of the URA or as chairman of a big listed company involved in aluminium dealings, well, perhaps as EXCO member, because that's the highest position he holds, he said that he could not see a need for that policy. Mr. Chairman, Hong Kong property for Hong Kong people is almost the most important strategy of C.Y. Leung to prevent Hong Kong property being brought up by people with foreign nationalities, so that there would not be a shortage of supply in Hong Kong because of such speculation by foreign nationals. Mr. Chung said that was not necessary, and he said in open fora and also in meetings that he did not think there was the need. At present, because of the confidentiality rule, we would not know what had really transpired at the Executive Council meeting. I don't know whether the two of them had any debate on the issue. What I know is that the CE did not flout the majority view of EXCO. That means that Mr. Barry Chung has not been effective in his role as EXCO member to help C.Y. Leung implement the policy. Mr. Chairman, people say if this debate goes on for another 3 days, Hong Kong will be paralyzed. But with a policy that is viewed to be the most important before the CE assumed office, and still now the policies have been implemented only bit by bit. Mr. Lan Kwok-hung, you spent 4 minutes to speak on something that can be covered within a few seconds, so please do not speak on end. Chairman, please just state your viewpoints and then come up with new viewpoints. My viewpoint is very complex, but I will try to simplify it. Mr. Barry Chung is the chairman of the URA. He has a deep understanding in urban renewal. And the policy of Hong Kong people, or property for Hong Kong people, is to tackle the shortage of urban property. which should not be totally swept up by foreign buyers. Knowledge-wise, he must compare favorably with other EXCO members, and he must shoulder this important responsibility. He should not have argued against the CE in open fora, and CE was not able to implement that policy in full even today. And the CE said openly that he had to consider legal issues and had to consider this and that. Okay, I'll put that aside for the moment. That mistake has been committed by Mr. Barry Zhang. Another thing, as I said, well, I will not go into that. You know, you understand it. The URA is funded by government. If I go on with this, I think I will be taken to task by you. Mr. Barry Zhang has revised the URA policies in many ways. Now, I don't know whether he initiated it. The policy of the URA used to be that it would look everywhere to identify communities where there is a shortage of funds and where private property developers. Mr. Kwok-hung, I'm of the view that you have repeated your viewpoints in a protracted manner. According to ROP 45(1), I will have to order you not to speak again. Can you adjourn the meeting? I have to protest. You have to point out how I am being prolonged and vexatious. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Kwok-hung, I cannot allow you to speak again. Please sit down. Chairman, Mr. Kwok-hung, I have already warned you many times, but you still repeat your speech in irrelevant and tedious manner. So, according to 45(1), I cannot allow you to speak again.
Just on this one, this joint debate currently before us. I'm not too sure what you were saying. Are you talking about the second joint debate? I won't argue with you. Well, you need to be frank. Please be frank as to what, and be clear as to whether you're talking about the second joint debate. If you don't sit down, I'll have to rule that you are in disorderly conduct. Mr. Fan Kwok-wai, would like to make inquiry about the rules of procedures. I read the rules of procedure. You referred to Rule 45. For Rule 41, that's about contents of speeches. You may stop people from speaking if it is irrelevant. It doesn't say that we can't repeat. For Rule 39, Mr. Fan, I've already said that I ruled in accordance with Rule 45(1). Please take a look of it. Yes, indeed, I have. You said that it is a case of being persistent in irrelevant or tedious repetition. Rules 31, 41, and 39 is that it doesn't actually refer to repetition. Mr. Fan, please read 45(1). 45(1) says, the President, the Chairman of a Committee of the whole Council, or the Chairman of any standing or select committee, after having called the attention of the Council or the Committee to the conduct of a member who persists in irrelevance or tedious repetition of his own or other members' arguments in the debate, may direct him to discontinue his speech. Right? Yes. This morning, I have been listening to the debate. You have always been accusing Mr. Kwok-hung for being repetitive. Until just now, you talked about 45(1), irrelevant and tedious repetition. I just want to say that Rules 39 and 41 refer to repetition. Mr. Fan, yes. If you want to attend a lecture on rules of procedure, I'll be more than happy to do it after the meeting. I have never referred to other rules. I'm referring to 45(1). Just now, you clearly read out the relevant rule. This morning, time and again, I reminded Leung Kwok-hung that he had been tediously repeating his arguments. So I have already warned him many times, but he still hasn't taken on board my view. And therefore, according to 45(1), I'm now directing him to discontinue his speech. Please sit down. Does any other member wish to speak in relation to this joint debate? If not, Mr. Fernando Cheung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak to support the spirit of this amendment. Which amendment? Of course, this amendment involves many. We are having a joint debate covering 102 amendments. Please specify which one. I support the direction of this joint debate as to the cutting of the honoraria of the non-official members of the EXCO. I don't think I have a clear answer as to the magnitude of the cut. But then basically, in principle, I think their honoraria should be cut. I want to talk about 2 points. First of all, in terms of the mechanism. Second, in terms of their duties. Mr. Chairman, as to the justification for cutting their honoraria, as far as the system is concerned, for this group of non-official members of the EXCO, well, they are not accountable to the public at all. They have to uphold confidentiality. They operate in a black box. They are the advisory organ for the topmost echelon, and it is only advisory in nature. At law and in terms of the system, a lot of the important decisions are supposed to be made by the CE in council. And then for this group of EXCO members, where do they come from? They haven't gone through any election. They don't have to go through any democratic procedures. Rather, they have been appointed directly by the CE. For this group of non-official members, they are at the topmost level of the structure in terms of decision-making, and the decisions they make will affect each and everybody in Hong Kong, and yet under 2 principles. First, collective responsibility. Second, collective confidentiality. Mean that this group of non-official members of the EXCO do not actually need to be responsible to the public, because come what may, irrespective of the decision to be made, they have to keep things confidential on a collective basis. They don't have to say anything about it, and in fact, they can't say anything about it. In other words, they may give approval to the rise in tariffs or fares or public utilities and public transports and the MTR, etc. They approve the fare increase. What about the process of approval? What about the details that they attend to? They are not accountable to the public at all. And in fact, they shouldn't disclose anything to the public because they have to observe confidentiality. Decisions made within the EXCO and the process of it have to be kept confidential. And it is a matter of collective responsibility. So individually, they don't have to be responsible. It is a government decision. The EXCO has the topmost officials. We have the team of principal officials under the accountability system, and of course the CE. So what do they do? Now, if you say that they give advice to the administration, it is an advisory organ. An advisory organ doesn't and shouldn't receive any basic honorarium. The majority of the advisory bodies don't actually have something similar. maybe we just claim back some traveling expenses. Now here they are receiving on a monthly basis tens of thousands of dollars. But is it to cover their traveling expenses? Do they need that much? In an overseas country where they practice democracy, they won't have something as awkward as this. Now this EXCO basically looks like a cabinet. When there is a cabinet in a democratic government, then we have democratically elected presidents or mayors or executive chief and members, usually MPs or local councillors who have been elected by the people. Usually the executive chief will appoint elected members. They are representative, they have the mandate of the people, and then they will be responsible for different portfolios. In Hong Kong, we haven't got this sort of democratic system. And as a result, we have what we have got today, that is the accountability system. The EXCO is in fact a monster. The CE may appoint a dozen or so non-official EXCO members. They are not accountable to the public. They need not to. As to the thinking process, as to the discussion, well, they have to keep it confidential collectively. Once a decision has been made, and even if it is a wrong one, well, it would be the accountability system officials that have to take responsibility and not the non-official members. So don't you agree with me that this is a very strange matter? I don't think the EXCO should have this sort of arrangements. In fact, we should be moving towards democracy. And in 2017, 2020, if we want to have direct elections, if we want to have one-man vote for both the LegCo and the CE, and if we are to keep such an EXCO with a group, well, in fact, it accounts for about half of them, with a group of such non-official members who haven't been democratically elected, and yet they can enter the topmost organ, and then with collective responsibility, collective confidentiality, they don't have to be accountable to the public. Now, if we turn this system into an advisory organization, well, usually the government would say that we need the elite to assist the government in coming to important decisions because they have leadership, they have expertise in their own portfolios. They're able to give good advice to the government. If that is the case, then it is advisory rather than decision-making in nature. Well, if it is advisory in nature, then the government should go about it properly and then arrange for the non-official members to follow the usual practices for advisory bodies. That is, they shouldn't be entitled to an honorarium. In overseas countries, well, to be frank, if somebody is to be appointed to a top-notch advisory body, it is an honor, and usually it is a sort of public service. We've heard many non-official EXCO members who say that it is their honor. They are proud of it, and they're saying that they are paying back to society, they are serving the public. If it is indeed the case, why should they be given such a high level of pay when compared with their own income? Of course, it may be nothing. However, if you look at our socio-economic conditions, if you look at our income levels, Mr. Chairman, don't forget that the median wage today is but $12,000 a month. But for this group of EXCO members, they get much, much more than that, many more times. If it is a case of honor, if it is a form of public service, why should they be given this honoraria? I really don't understand. Therefore, in terms of the system, I think for this EXCO. I think it itself is full of oddities. And in our democratization process, I think the EXCO must be reformed. And for the non-official members, for the honoraria, I think, therefore, it should be changed. Therefore, when I look at the system, I support the cut of the honoraria. As to the magnitude, I think they should be replaced by reimbursement of their traveling expenses. If they have to attend a meeting once a week, how much should be given to them? I think we just do some calculations. For some advisory bodies, I think we have something similar. The majority of the advisory bodies, as far as I understand, there are over 400 of them, don't give any honoraria to their members, but some do have it. But still, when we try to adopt that as a benchmark for the EXCO members' honoraria, then probably we are merely talking about a few $1,000s rather than the level that we are seeing today. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, as far as the system is concerned, I support the amendment, and I support the amendment itself. That is, we should cut the honoraria of the EXCO members. I support the direction. And then, Mr. Chairman, I want to talk about the duties. In relation to the non-official members of the EXCO, have they really discharged their duties? Have they given good advice to the administration so that the society, in terms of our economic development, social development, livelihood, environment, etc., in particular, in terms of rule of law and human rights, freedom, democracy, we are making progress? Mr. Chairman, I won't be tedious. I won't be commenting on each and every area. I won't even talk about a particular policy in great details. But all in all, we've been returned to China for over 10 years.
The Executive Council, as the topmost policy-making organ of the administration, what have they achieved? Let's look at the results. Economic development. In terms of economic development, we are doing quite well. Apart from the financial crisis, financial tsunami, and the SARS outbreak, when our economy declined, on the whole, our economic development has been making good progress. We have expanded our pie by 50%, and this is an outstanding achievement. As the topmost power organ of the government, obviously, it has achieved results. But apart from economic development, we need to think about rule of law, freedom, democracy, social development. Have we made any progress in these regards? There have been media coverage worldwide pointing out that the wealth gap in Hong Kong is the worst amongst advanced economic entities. The United Nations also released a report stating that we had the most serious wealth gap problem in terms of over 20 advanced economic entities. And the reasons behind the forming of such a wide wealth gap are very complicated. And that is exactly why the Executive Council, and in particular non-official members of the Executive Council, should reflect truly the situation of Hong Kong society to the administration. In relation to social conflicts recently happening in Hong Kong, for example, the dockers' strike, industrial safety and subdivided flats, environmental protection, These are fundamental problems. But over the decade, what have the non-official members of the Executive Council done over the past decade? On wealth gap, these non-official members could very well see the worsening situation of these deep-seated conflicts as pointed out by mainland officials. Hong Kong is facing problems of deep-seated conflicts and wealth gap. Why is it that this group of non-official members have not been able to advise the government on how the problem could be addressed? On numerous occasions, they made decisions on fare hikes of public transport companies. I'm sorry, Chairman. Does any other member wish to speak? Am I allowed to speak now? Mr. Kwok-hung, as I said just now, in this joint debate, I cannot allow you to speak. I object. Does any other member wish to speak? Dr. Fernando Jiang, please be concise. Mr. Chairman, may I be allowed to continue? Please be concise. Chairman, I can speak at length about wealth gap, but I won't repeat the points. I just want to point out that when I was living in Hong Kong for the past decade, according to my observation on the Executive Council, in particular non-official members of the Executive Council, in relation to their conducts and the remarks made, I really can't see what actual work they have done. On major decisions, they had not been able to stop the administration from making wrong decisions. On housing problem, which the chief executive is according top priority, apart from the 9 measures from Michael Sun, since then there's been imbalance between demand and supply, and the PRH waiting list is getting longer and longer, and over the past decade the subdivision of flats is becoming more and more serious. But I don't see what work has been done by these 10-odd non-official members of the Executive Council over the past decade. Even outside the Council, they are unable to tell members of the public that they represent the public and that they can reflect the views of the public. But on the contrary, they're not fulfilling their duties. On major policy decisions, they do not understand the plight of the general public. As they're not part of the administration, how come they still fail to reflect these problems? So, Chairman, on the mechanism itself and on the duties on non-official members of the Executive Council, they should be kept at the advisory level, and that their honoraria should be paid in accordance with their functions as members of an advisory body. I don't think these members have effectively reflected the views of the community to the administration. As a result, the administration has kept making wrong decisions. And wealth gap thus is worsening in Hong Kong, and our situation regarding democracy and freedom of speech, etc., and rule of law is deteriorating. So I support the amendments, and I support the direction of the amendments. As a member of the Legislative Council, who are also members of the Executive Council, I think, again, it's contradictory, because under the principle of collective confidentiality, these LegCo members must side with the government. When there are errors in the government's decisions, or where the decisions are in contrary with public opinion, or where these decisions can not reflect the cannot act on behalf of the interests of the general public, despite them being LegCo members as well, they must side with the government and remain silent as executive members, and they must follow the direction of the administration. So this mechanism and this system is in conflict with the legislature. If we're moving towards the direction of one person, one vote, no LegCo member should enter such a structure of collective responsibility and collective confidentiality. It is an intrinsic conflict. It is an inherent, an intrinsic conflict. This conflict, I don't know how to put it in Chinese, this conflict cannot be resolved. So, about LegCo members being also non-official members of the Executive Council, I find it problematic. So on the whole, I support this direction of cutting the honoraria for non-official members of the Executive Council. Does any other member wish to speak on this joint debate? Mr. Lai-wan, what's your question? I wish to speak on this subject. I'm sorry, Kwok-hung, as I said just now, as you failed to pay heed to my advice several times, I cannot allow you to speak. This is a parenting system. My father died long time ago. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any official from the administration wish to speak? If not, so that concludes this part of the debate. I move on to the third joint debate.